They mocked her the moment she walked into the mansion. They laughed at her old clothes and whispered that she had come looking for money. But they had no idea what was inside the final will. And when the lawyer finally read it, the entire room went silent. Margaret was 68 when her husband, Richard, died. For more than 30 years, she had lived a simple life beside him. She drove an old car, wore inexpensive clothes, and never cared about impressing anyone. But Richard's family judged her for it. His brother Charles believed she had married Richard for his money. His daughter Vanessa barely respected her. After Richard's funeral, they assumed Margaret had been left with almost nothing. Then she received a letter from Richard's lawyer. She was invited to the family mansion for the reading of his final will. When Margaret arrived, Charles looked at her old coat and laughed. "You actually came dressed like that?" Vanessa smiled. "Maybe she doesn't have anything better." Margaret said nothing. She quietly took her seat. The lawyer, Daniel Brooks, opened a thick folder. Charles leaned back. "Let's finish this quickly." Daniel began reading. According to the final wishes of Richard Hayes, his wife, Margaret Hayes, is the primary beneficiary of his estate. Charles stopped smiling. "What?" Daniel continued. "She receives the family mansion, several properties, his investment portfolio, and his controlling interest in Hayes Global Holdings." Vanessa immediately stood up. "That's impossible." Daniel calmly replied. "It is exactly what your father wanted." Charles shook his head. "My brother would never leave everything to her." Daniel pulled another document from the folder. "He knew you might say that." It was a letter written by Richard. Daniel began reading. "To my family. If you are hearing this, you are probably wondering why I left my estate to Margaret. The answer is simple. She stayed with me when I had nothing. When my first business failed, she encouraged me to continue. When I struggled, she never abandoned me. And when I became wealthy, she never asked me for anything. She loved me before the money. That is why she deserves it after me." Margaret lowered her head as tears filled her eyes. Daniel continued. "My family judged Margaret because she chose to live simply. You mistook her humility for weakness. Do not make that mistake again." Charles slowly sat down. Vanessa couldn't speak. Then Daniel revealed the value of the inheritance. More than $200 million. The room became completely silent. The woman they had mocked was now the wealthiest person there. Charles looked at Margaret. "Margaret. I'm sorry." She looked at him calmly. "You weren't sorry when you were laughing." He lowered his eyes. But Daniel had one final message. Richard had created a charitable foundation and placed Margaret in control. He wanted her to use part of his fortune to help elderly people who had been abandoned by their families. Margaret wiped away her tears. "He knew me," she whispered. Months later, Margaret began helping people across the city. She supported elderly widows, struggling families, and people who couldn't afford medical care. She never used her fortune to punish the relatives who had mocked her. She didn't need revenge. The truth had already done that for her. Her family had judged her by her clothes, her car, and her quiet lifestyle. They thought having little meant being worth little. But they were wrong. You can never measure someone's worth by what you see on the outside. The woman they thought had nothing had inherited everything. And sometimes, the person everyone laughs at today is the person who leaves everyone speechless tomorrow.